Feel free to ask any question. I am actually trying to respond anyway. Let's do that. How can I? Is this for the?
Yeah, it should work.
Okay. Anyway, I was asked to talk about crops water use. It's a very broad subject actually, and but I found it very interesting. So I put together some information, and I did combine that information with some of the research we are conducting here at the University of Wyoming Research and Extension Center in Powell. This is what I'm going to try to talk about, a little bit about water in the West, which obviously you all know about.
Excuse me just a second. I'm trying to move this.
Sure.
Oh, screen.
Thanks. Perfect.
I can't get rid of it, but I can make it less obvious.
That's much better. Thank you.
Okay.
Then we will talk a little quickly about weather and climate, then evapotranspiration, crop evapotranspiration, crop coefficient, ET, and phenology. We will explain quickly what is phenology and how ET is used for vegetative, reproductive growth, and a little bit about water stress, how we estimate ET crop, and some concluding remarks. Works?
What does ETC stand for?
Crop evapotranspiration. Oops.
Just push the space bar and then it should work again on the.
Yeah. Just I didn't want to go here to come here. Oh, I guess.
Enter.
The enter.
So you said hit space?
Yeah, I guess why? Because we moved this thing.
Yeah, it's because you messed
There
with
we
it.
go.
And then it should work off your thing again.
So, water in the West is really very important, as we can see in this map. If you look at the eastern part of the country, it looks pretty green. So that means the greener, the more water we have. And then as we move to the west, we start to see that the limitations with precipitation is pretty high. If we make a close-up of some part of the west just to have Wyoming here, we can see that we are really, really, really red. And if we go to Wyoming, of course, that's what we get. Besides Yellowstone Park and some other spots, we are around 8 to 14 inches per year. That's what we get. Why I'm showing this? Well, if we want to make numbers and we calculate for pretty much every single crop, 14 inches, which is the maximum we can see there, is just not enough for any of the crops we plant here in the state, okay? So, so that shows us the importance of water in the state and the importance of trying to come up with good calculations of evapotranspiration. So these are some of the numbers as related to irrigation. There are 42 million is the estimate irrigated acres for Western U.S. And this is for as for 2010, and we have $103 billion is the total production value for all 17 Western states. Within those, 52 billion is the annual direct household income for the Western U.S. region as well. You can see here some of the trends. Basically, what you can see is that the total water use remains pretty much constant. Eventually, it goes down a little bit, and then you can see here that gravity irrigation, which stands for flood irrigation and all those kind of irrigation, is going down, steadily going down, and sprinkler irrigation is steadily going up. And then we have here the acreage for each one of those two irrigation systems, which match as well. One is going down and the other is going up. Okay, why that? Basically because, as you know, there is a lot of problems with drought. In many regions of the country, we are running out of water to produce crops. So people, what it's doing is moving from surface irrigation to, let's say, more efficient irrigation systems, such as sprinkler and drip as well. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about weather and climate, because usually it's just to make a background of what we're going to talk about. Usually we make a mistake, and we talk on weather and we talk on climate as synonym, but actually are two very different things. Weather, as I put it there, is a mix of events that happen each day in the atmosphere, or let's put it in the easiest way, is what we experience every single day. That's weather. While climate is the average weather pattern in a place over many years. You can see here, weather is not the same everywhere. For example, yesterday we were 28 degrees here in Power, and we were 48 degrees there in Cody. So that's whether it was happening yesterday. As for climate, climate controls the weather where we live. Another important thing regarding weather is that what is important for weather is time and place. So that means I am interested on where we got rainfall, for example, and at what time. That's what interests me in terms of weather. If we talk in terms of climate, we want to know the area that is pretty much with the same environmental conditions, and in the temporal average conditions under that area. So, for example, if someone comes to me and says that the weather in 2 months is going to be a shiny day, no rainfall at all, I might think twice before I trust that person, because nobody with today's technology can tell us what is going to be the weather in no more than probably 4 or 5 days. Okay, but climate, people could tell us what is going to be the climate in 100,000 years. That's pretty easy to come up with. And also, you might hear that we talk on El Nino, La Nina, neutral years. That's climate. That's pretty much very well understood how it works, and people is able to make good forecasting of those kind of conditions. Well, but the question here is which one is much more important for decision making in agriculture, or let's put it better, in irrigated agriculture? Climate or weather? Weather, yes, exactly. Weather is what really is important for us in the agricultural business, because it's the one that is going to really affect our crop. We know already that in the western part of the United States, the climate is this, and this. But within that specially distributed conditions, several things could happen. So, and I put that because I wanted to talk to you about this, which is the most important subject of my talk today, evapotranspiration. So evapotranspiration, as the word says, is made of 2 parts: evaporation from soil and leaves canopy surface, and the transpiration, which is the water that comes through the plant and then goes into the atmosphere. So if we have a crop that has a small plant canopy, the evaporation is going to be greater than the transpiration. And then the opposite as well. For large plant canopy, the transpiration is going to be greater than the evaporation. And those kind of things are important when we come to irrigation water management at the field scale. So the evapotranspiration is the definition. Its definition is a well-watered grass or alfalfa, and we call it reference evapotranspiration. So that means from there we can talk in general terms, and we don't need to. We are not going to make mistakes with different crops and things like that. You see here that I am not talking on crop evapotranspiration. I am talking on evapotranspiration, and specifically in reference evapotranspiration. So actually the reference evapotranspiration tends to be higher than the crop evapotranspiration. And also, that reference evapotranspiration varies from one place to another, of course. And most importantly, we can estimate reference evapotranspiration with weather variables, such as air temperature, solar radiation, wind speed, relative humidity, and other variables. This is a 3D picture that probably doesn't look very good here, but was made at the University of Idaho. This is the reference evapotranspiration for a region. It gives us an idea where the atmosphere is requiring more moisture. So, but this is not for irrigation purposes. Just gives us an idea where we might need more water and there we might eventually need less water. Then comes the crop evapotranspiration, which is also a combination of evaporation and transpiration. The ETC, or crop evapotranspiration, is also called crop water use, and that's what is important for us. And the ETC can be obtained by direct and indirect methods, and we will quickly talk about those methods later. And as I said previously, we can estimate the crop evapotranspiration based on the reference evapotranspiration, the one that is just from weather conditions. And we estimated, following this simple equation, and what we put in between is this Kc, which is a crop-specific coefficient, and that crop-specific coefficient is kind of the link between the reference evapotranspiration and the crop, or in other words, between the weather and the crop. So then, if we know the ETC, we are pretty much done. So we know how much water we have to apply in an irrigation event, for example. But why the ET crop is important? As you can see here, these are real data from an experiment we are conducting here at the station with one of my grad students. What we have here in this experiment is alfalfa under different irrigation treatments. And this is the yield. And you can see something interesting here. As the water use, or ETC, increases, the yield increases as well, right? So until a maximum ET, which will provide us with a maximum yield as well. Of course, if I reach this point, we haven't reached yet in this experiment, but if I reach this point and I want to keep applying more water, my yield will go down as well. It's the same as if I put just a little bit, okay? Not because I have a lot of water, I have to put a lot of water. The crop is going to use what it needs. The rest, we are going to lose it. So that's probably the most important component, the most important thing of the crop ET. So for example, it fits very well the relation between water use and yield, as you can see here with this simple equation here, and this R2 equals to 0.98. It's telling us that there is a very, very good relation here. The closer to 1, the better is going to be the relation between this and this side, okay? And also, it is telling me that for each inch of water, I am producing 725 pounds per acre of alfalfa in this case.
Your soil type could play into that quite a lot, wouldn't it?
Yes, but if you, it's a very good question. If you have, this is a loamy soil. If instead of a loamy soil, I will have, let's say, a sandy soil, which is one extreme, I will exactly have the same relation, okay? Where the soil plays a very good role, and we will see later, is on how we manage the conditions of the soil as related to the amount of water that we have to apply and how often we have to apply that water.
Now, our challenge, of course, is in this area, we have 3 different kinds of soil types in the same field.
Right.
And so it's difficult to know whether you're overwatering or not watering enough. And so, the graph it's great for one particular soil type, because you can get that figured out, but sometimes
Yes.
it's tough.
But this relation should be pretty much the same, very close. The problem you're talking about is the management. And how much water you have to apply if you have a sandy soil, a clay soil, a loamy soil, you know, those kind of things. You know, if you have an area of, let's say, 1,000 acres, it's going to be pretty hard to manage even if it's a big, huge area, because you have to split it, for example, but you have to work previous to that. There is a variable rate irrigation management, they call, which what they do is actually they map the area, and the system, usually is on their center pivot, the system applies the amount of water that is needed at every single spot. So it varies the rate that is being applied. The system is already under commercial use in Georgia and other southeastern states. But the problem is that it's very expensive. That's one. And when you calculate the average of water that you apply with that variable rate and the average of your yield you get, you come to pretty much the same as you are doing with just one rate. But that's the trend, to try to optimize the water use. Thank you for the question, it's really very interesting. Anyway, we can see here, as I said, that the more ET, the more yield, and soil moisture and weather conditions will allow reaching maximum transpiration. And after that, of course, will go down again. And as I said, also the relation is crop specific or genotype specific in this case. So anyway, now we know that ET0, which is ET reference, is different to ET crop. ET0 is also called the atmospheric demand. That means is the amount of water that the atmosphere is trying to get from any space. And we also talked that ETC can be calculated based on weather, crop, soil management, etc. And ETC can be estimated with, from ET0 following this relation. So let me show you in another graph what is the difference between the two ETs. The red one is the reference ET, and the blue one is the crop ET. So many people, what many people does, they use ET reference for irrigation. Okay, when you do that, this is a corn crop. You are applying this amount of water for this crop when this crop actually needs exactly this, the blue one. So we are over irrigating pretty much all time except for the maximum water needs. And then again, when the needs for water go down, we keep irrigating with the reference evapotranspiration, and we are over irrigating at the end. If we do the numbers here, you will notice that really we are just, losing money by doing that, because we could save a lot of water and eventually 2 and maybe 3 irrigations. So the crop coefficient, which is the coefficient that we need to make the relation between the reference evapotranspiration and the crop evapotranspiration, follows pretty much that shape there. A little bit in the beginning, then start to increase as the crop is growing, reaches the maximum, then goes down again. So when we use that, we notice from the previous graph that we don't need as much water as the ET reference. So this varies predominantly with the specific crop characteristics. For example, water used for vegetative growth is usually less than the water used for reproductive growth, that we can see here. We need less water here than the water we need here, okay? And water stress during critical growth periods reduces also yield and quality of crops. That means if we have, I guess I had something here. Oh no. I guess if we have lack of water here, we will pretty much have reduction in our final yield. So this is another example of dry beans and ET. So this is what we call phenology. Phenology is how crops develop during the growing season, which is different to growth. Growth is the change on dry matter. So a child, when he's 2 months, 1 year old, for example, might have a weight of, I don't know, 40 pounds, for example. And at 2 years old, it's going to be 50 pounds. That's growth. But a child at the beginning is a baby, and then it's a little boy, and then it's a teenager, and it looks different. That's phenology, or that's development. And the good thing with development or phenology is that we can see what's going on with our crops in this case. And based on what is going on with our crops, we can determine when, in this case, talking on irrigation, is the best time or the time that the crop needs more water. Specifically for dry beans, we start our need for water when the crop is just coming up with the flowers. From there until grain filling is the period of time where we need a lot of water. So again, if we have an irrigation system, that system has to be able to meet the peak water requirements to avoid reduction in yield. This is a real case. This is the ET and phenology for sunflowers here in Power. We usually plant around these days. Probably should have a little bit more humidity. And there are some interesting facts we have found there. For example, during the first 30 days, sunflower uses approximately 20% of the total water that requires to grow in a healthy way. And then around this period here, it uses 55% of the total water, and at the end, 25% more. So you can see that, again, in this graph here, pretty much doesn't rain. These bars here are inches of water. It's practically nothing as compared to the amount of water that the crop needs. So what happens during the vegetative growth for a crop if there is a lack of water? Well, basically what's going to happen is that, how to put this? The crop needs at the beginning a little bit water for germination and emergence, and then it will take, it will need a certain amount of water to go from the vegetative growth stages to the stages where seed can be produced. For example, we know that for wheat, barley, and corn, we need approximately 4 to 5 inches of water from planting to the beginning of flowering, let's say, okay? And also we know that the amount of water needed during vegetative growth varies because crops do not need too much water during that period. We plant during the spring, so we don't need too much water at that time. So the amount of water that we should apply by irrigation is less than the amount of water that we need to apply when the crop looks like this, for example. Also, for cool season crops, we have usually daytime high temperatures in the range of 60 to 65 to 70, which are ideal for growth. What else? And with that temperature, the crops are able to use the available water in the soil profile, and they don't use too much the water to cool themselves. You know, the evapotranspiration, the crops need transpire because they need to cool off. But during the winter, that's not the case. So then we also know that cereal crops at the teetering stage use approximately 1/10 of an inch per day of water. That means if I plant corn, let's say barley at the beginning of the season, probably I don't need to apply more than 1/10 of an inch. This is per day, okay? Cereal crops at the stem elongation, which is when they start to grow as well, need about between 1 to 2/10 of an inch per day. And then, when temperatures are above 75, close to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, the moisture needed is about 2/10 of an inch or even a little bit more. This is the air temperature for the 2011 growing season here in Power. You can see here that most of the time we are between 40 and 60 degrees. And when we reach 60, it's already mid of June. And when we go down, it's mid of August actually. So why I'm showing this, because it tells us that actually this is the period when we need a lot of water. Before, which is when we plant around here, actually the requirements for irrigation are minimum, okay? And of course, at the end of the season for an annual crop as well, we don't need too much water actually. In other words, if we are not talking on flood irrigation, but sprinkler irrigation or drip irrigation, we might know. We have calculated, and we will use per acre 1/3 of what we usually use when we are flooding a field.
That's an interesting graph, though. I've always been under the impression that you had to continue to water your crop as it matured,
Oh no,
or you would shorten the crop. You get small grain, or you would fill out your kernels.
yeah, actually depends on the crop, huh? For example, probably the easiest example is sweet corn. Sweet corn is a specialty crop. Sweet corn we have to keep irrigating until harvest practically. In the case of corn or other grains, we don't need to keep irrigating until the end. There is a moment in the phenology where the crop don't need water anymore. What needed to do is done already. And you can just get rid of the irrigation with no harm in your yield.
But you do irrigate it until that crop is done, right?
Oh yes.
I mean, you don't just assume, well,
Yes, I have an example here a little bit.
Okay.
You will see there how we handle it, and we did it pretty good. On one days at this stem elongation stage, a cereal crop will use about 3/4 to 1.5 inches per week of water. Okay, that means the crop really has grown and is getting very close to the reproductive phase. Okay. So when cereal crops are at the heading stage, for example, for spring wheat, often by early July, water use is between 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch per day under ideal conditions. Of course, peak water use is substantial from July to August for us here. Okay, it's when we need a lot of water. July, August is really key, and if moisture is lacking during this period, significant yield reduction could occur, and that we have seen as well. And now, if we move to the reproductive stages, cereal crops after heading, when we are getting pretty close to flowering, we'll continue to use between 3/4 to 1.5 inches per week. Under optimal conditions of growth. As grain feeding nears completion, crop water use declines and drops off rapidly as plants approach maturity. That's what we were showing previously. And under good environmental conditions, for each inch of water that we use, wheat produces 5 to 7 bushels per acre of grain, and barley produces 7 to 9 bushels per acre of grain as well. For each inch of water. The water, what happens if we don't use water properly? Basically, we are going to have a crop under stress, right? And the stress of the crops depends on when that stress is going to occur and how long it's going to take, okay? Those are the two key issues. Generally speaking, on most of the crops, if we have a mild stress during the vegetative period, we might not have problems with our yield. On the other hand, if the stress occurs during the reproductive period, we might have really very big losses. So during the vegetative growth, what we can see is that there is a reduction in the growth rate of leaves and stems. So that's when soil moisture availability is limited, the cell expansion and division within the plant slow down, okay? And the effect is that plants reduce the production of enzymes and proteins needed for growth. Well, that's a little bit theoretical, but Let me show you, for example, this is a real experiment here at the station as well. What you can see there is sugar beets. As the soil moisture deficiency increases, as we deplete the water in the soil profile, the plant roots cannot take up enough water to meet the transpiration needs. That means the atmospheric demand might be too high, and we don't have enough water to keep the plant getting that water, obtaking that water. So how the crops respond? Okay, the plant actually responds by closing the stomata, which are small pores in the leaves. Close the stomata. When we close the stomata, the leaves may wilt, okay? And because the stomata are closed, there is no gas exchange with the atmosphere, so there is no CO2 uptake, there is no O2 release, and the plant is practically not working, and we reduce our yield. That's the principle, let's say. But then, at the end of the day, when the air temperature cools and the conditions start to get better at field, we might see the crops recovering again. And this is what we call a temporary stress. And this is what you can see here in this experiment. Actually, there are two things here. This experiment is about stress on, we are conducting here on sugar beets. This part of the experiment are stressed beets. The above part, the part on top, receives enough water to avoid stress. However, the atmospheric demand is too high that the crop itself wilts temporarily. And that's very common in sugar beets. If you go at 2 or 3 p.m. in a sugar beet in July, you see that thing there, you want to cry probably when you see that. If you come the next day at 9 a.m., you will see that it's nice. It looks very nice. That's a normal reaction of the plant, and it's not going to harm it. Okay? That's during the vegetative part. Anyway, but depending on the crop and depending on how the stress is induced, the responses are going to be different. These are also two experiments we are conducting there. This is with corn, and the other one is dry beans. Let me explain to you the corn first. I put together results from subsurface drip, on surface drip, sprinkler, and on each one of these irrigation methods, we are using different irrigation strategies, from a little bit of water to enough water, let's say plenty of water to grow well. And what you can see here is, of course, when we put a little bit of water, the result is low yield. If we put enough water, the result is high yields, okay? It is interesting because it tells us also that for each inch of water that we are applying, we are getting 350 plus pounds of yield per acre. Well, this is preliminary, but this is the way it works actually. So when we put the crop under stress here for this to receive just a little bit of water, we did it when the crop was at tasseling, okay? So we stopped irrigating at tasseling, and as a consequence, we got less than 7,000 pounds per acre of grain. And then after, I guess it was 2 weeks, we started irrigating again. So we stressed the crop during 2 weeks, and because of those 2 weeks, we went down from more than 10,000 to less than 7,000 in yield. It's amazing how it works. Then we have another experiment with, excuse me?
So are we watering often enough when it's really hot in the summer, or do we need to water more?
No. Actually, how to say, no matter how hot it's going to be, and there is a certain amount of water that the crop needs. What happens, as I said previously, is that if it's really too hot, the crop is not going to be able to evapotranspirate enough.
But is that a permanent loss, or only if it's for an extended period of time.
No, if you have enough, that's very good. You have enough water in the soil, which is the purpose of irrigation and how irrigation should work. You might see a temporary stress. As soon as, let's say at 4 or 5, temperature goes down very quick. The ambient is just much better, and the plants recover again. And that's going to be okay. You are not going to have losses in your yield. But if you stress, purposely I did stress this crop for 2 weeks. I just shut off the irrigation at tacit, and I didn't irrigate it in 2 weeks while I kept irrigating these ones here. This is what happens. You lose 40 to 60% of your yield. But the amount of water the crop needs is just one. I mean, depending on the environmental conditions and all those things, you calculate, and it's going to be one. But it might not be able to use it because it's too hot, so it closes the stomata, the things we were talking about. So,
You talked about the plant stomach, if you will, okay? That holds the moisture in the plant itself. Does the moisture get in the plant through the roots, or is there absorption in the leaves as well?
No, it comes from the roots to the leaves, not from the leaves to the roots.
Well, I understand that, but I've seen it, especially in pivots, where a crop may have got just a little bit hurt. You had to shut down the spray or something. And as soon as that sprinkler goes across there, that plant brightens right up and goes. And I've often thought there's got to be some absorption in that leaf.
Practically not. It's just
It's totally
not
comes from the
significant.
roots.
But that's a very good point. And I'm going to tell you what happens. When you wet, well, let's say you are not irrigating or you stop irrigating whatever, and you see the crop that is suffering, right?
Right.
So, and it's very dry, mostly in our environment here, because it's dry here. That is vapor pressure deficit, or VPD we call. So the vapor pressure deficit is too high, okay, when you are not irrigating. So the plant the vapor pressure deficit is the thing that drives the evapotranspiration, in fact. So the plant cannot handle it and close the stomata. When you start irrigating, you wet the atmosphere around the plant. So what happens is the plant just opens the stomata and starts working immediately. That's the reason. But the plant does not use its water from the leaves through it. It's because the relative humidity or the humidity of the air went up. And that allows the plant to be, let's say, a happy crop. Maybe you've seen in how do you call it? Greenhouses. In some places in greenhouses they use mist irrigation. Well, the mist irrigation has two purposes. One is to cool off, and the other one is to reduce the vapor pressure deficit or to increase the relative humidity inside the environment so the crops keep transpirating.
So humidity doesn't really have a lot of effect on the plant, except its additional moisture in the atmosphere that's around the plant.
Correct, but that's very important because that humidity is needed for the plant to open the stomata and to get CO2 and release oxygen. It's very important that's a very good point, but that's the reason. If you put in percentage, probably the percentage of water that goes through the leaves is 0.000 something percent. It's pretty much nothing. It's 99.99999 through the roots. That's the way it works. But anyway, then we have another experiment for dry beans. We planted dry beans under 2 irrigation treatments. One is well irrigated with this 100 ET crop, and the other 75% of the fully irrigated. And we have this experiment under conventional till, no-till, and strip till. Okay, it is very interesting because you see here we got almost 3,000 pounds per acre under the conventional for full, but we got more than 3,300 pounds per acre under the no-till. and the strip till didn't do as good as the other two. But still, one of the reasons that probably this went up, is just preliminary because it's first year only, is because in the no-till, we had the surface covered, and we reduced the evaporation, and we were able to conserve a little bit more water in the soil profile. And the strip till worked a little bit good, but not as good as this one. And then, of course, if we reduce the amount of water that the crop needs, this is the result. In all three cropping systems, the yield we got was less than when fully irrigated, or let's say well irrigated. When cereal crops began wilting, all their leaves and tillers are aborted, and stem elongation is reduced. And also, when oilseed crops wilt, plants respond by abortion of the older leaves, reduce stem elongation and reduce branching, which will reduce crop yield potential. This is dryland winter wheat, okay? And you see here, it's almost dying. We didn't produce pretty much anything. This is at Sarek near Limo. And this is an experiment we have here, sunflowers, and this is the treatment where we stopped irrigating, and you can see here what happened. The plants actually are very smart. In this case, what they do is they shut off the lower leaves, so there is less leaves exposed to sunshine in the environment, and so they might be just surviving with a couple of leaves there on top. And that's why they don't die, let's say, but they produce very little. This is the results from the winter wheat. I told you this is in kilograms per hectare, but you pretty much divide by 2 and you have approximately pounds per acre. So I got here 1,700, 600, okay? And this is another sunflower experiment to show you how the evapotranspiration as related to yield changes as you plant earlier or later. This experiment consisted on several planting dates. We start planting the 1st of May, and our last plant was around the 30th of May. My dates are not exact, but they vary for 1 day, more or less. Anyway, you can see here that if we plant too early, we don't get too much. And if we plant too late, the same. But there is always an optimum. And the optimum for us from this first year varies between the 20th to the 30th of May. So there are several reasons for that, but looking at the evapotranspiration, of course, I won't expect, in terms of evapotranspiration, I won't expect the plant to need too much water here as the amount of water that the plant needs when planted here, okay? And the same is valid here because we spend too much the growing season to the end of the year.
See, we don't see that kind of yield in corn if you plant early like that.
But that's not corn, it's sunflower.
Okay, but is that just typical of that particular crop, or is that typical of any crop?
Oh, well, this is typical for sunflower in these planting dates, but that curve, you mean?
Yes.
Is typical for pretty much every single crop. And that's a typical experiment you do when you are trying to determine where is the best planting window for a specific crop.
Well, I understand that, but yields, I understand the plant growth would be different if you planted just a little bit too early, but your yields, I don't think are hurt that bad by planting a little early. I don't.
Oh, it depends on the crop. In this case, it was bad here, but usually it's going to be like this.
We also had a very cool spring. I wonder if that's based on 1 year, right?
That's 1 year, just this past year. But no matter which crop, you are going to find something pretty similar. And that's the way that when you receive a planting date record, let's say you are going to plant a crop that has never been planted here, but we can plant it, okay? And you want to know, between other things, when is the best planting date, right?
Sure.
So what researchers did was that they have planting date 1 to planting date N here, and they got here yield. They're going to have something like this. no matter which crop. So based on that, of course, you have to do this for 3, 4, 5, 6 years. They will tell you, okay, the planting date for your region is between May 1st to May 15, for example. That's the way we do.
I still question that. I mean, I guess I shouldn't, but honestly,
please.
honestly, you know, if you have, let's say your ideal planting time is May 10th to May 15th,
Mm-hmm.
a 5-day window,
Mm-hmm.
and you have 600 acres of ground to be planted in there,
Mm-hmm.
you can't just wait for the ideal time,
Right.
because you've got limitations on equipment and time and weather. I mean, things make effect. So, but time after time, we've watched our yields and the stuff that we get planted in early, before the ground is warm,
Mm-hmm.
time and again, always yield best.
Which, how many weeks early?
Corn,
Corn.
not
Okay.
many,
See,
like April
close.
20th
Yeah.
instead of May 10th.
I'm a seed analyst, you'll find the seeds will germinate slower, but they're there. If you go too long, you could start having effects with
Right.
the seeds, but,
Right.
yeah, they,
I understand the ideal
Yeah.
time, but I don't think it's ever affected our yields. That's why I question that.
Oh, yeah, it does. I am 100% sure. But the thing is that in this case, but one is first year. Second is sunflowers, not corn. And each crop respond different.
Specific, yeah.
Yeah, respond different. Actually, we were surprised with the results because we were expecting the 1st of May planting might be the best.
Sure.
That's
it
what
was
we-
really cool this year.
It was very cool at the beginning of the season. That's
And
right.
sunflowers are a very warm season crop.
Yes, that's what we got. But it's not bad actually. We are gonna repeat this year. And I was planning not to use the 1st of May because of this, but then I decided I will keep it and I will not use the last one, okay? But it's very interesting, and I am pretty sure that even if conditions are better, we might get pretty similar results. If this improves a little bit, it might get very close to here, but I will probably still having this at the best planting date. That's my guess right now.
We would lose 30 days of growing time if we planted May 30th.
Oh, yeah,
I mean,
I'm sure.
I just can't believe those yields. I just
I
don't
want-
believe it.
Last year was very different, huh? Oops, what did I do? Oh, now we're in trouble.
To trip on a cord.
Okay, there we go. You're right on something. We have approximately 120 days of growing season here, okay? So we have the 10th of May, we are pretty safe to plant,
Right.
okay? And the 10th of September,
We're on borrowed time.
that's what we have
Mhm.
on average, okay? I don't have the graph, but I've done that. But you're right. Now, the other thing is that if you plant around here, when you get here, you are pretty much done with your crop.
Right.
Pretty much done, okay? Depends on the crop as well. But on average, that's what you would expect in a, how to say, in a planting date experiment. Let's say for conditions other than here in Wyoming, instead of planting in May, probably you should plant in March. But you will still get in that thing like this. You will get the best thing. But anyway, the idea here is to show that if we got those yields, it's because the concentration was different as well. And that depends on when we harvest, we plant. Yeah, of course, if we have no yield at all, this is what happens. This is another experiment I have. Guess, you might not guess which crop is that one. It's sunflower. Okay? I had sunflower, well irrigated, a little bit irrigated, and not irrigated at all. This is 0 water. Some plants survive, but 90% was done. It's gone. Okay? So that's what we call permanent wilting point. Okay? The crop is not able to recover anymore. Even if I put water there, it's not going to recover. Just die.
Are certain crops more susceptible to that than others?
Yes, sunflower is more susceptible than alfalfa actually.
What about grasses? Can you tell me about grasses? Irrigated pasture.
Uh,
If you stress an irrigated pasture, Does it return, does it come back, or are you pretty
Again,
much done?
depend on the crop, on the pasture. Some pasture have a very long,
Yeah, not your groves
System.
or orchards, but more your, I don't know, Timothy's and things like that, that would be.
Timothy might not be very good actually. Timothy might not be very good. I have a specific talk about that. I don't remember the numbers. I can give it to you if you are interested. I have it. Anyway, this is another experiment with sunflowers. Sunflower. What we did is we had one treatment is fully irrigated, very well irrigated. Well, the first we did, we planted and we irrigate everything, okay, just for establishment, okay? And then we divide that in 4 blocks. One block was fully irrigated after the establishment irrigation. The other one we start irrigating on when the crop was at R1, which is when the head starts to show something like this. There is no more leaves coming on. So, and the R4 is when the head looks like this. The yellow, you can see the yellow, okay? And the RF is rainfed. The rainfed actually received 1 irrigation, which was for establishment. That's what we did. We did that during 3 years already. I am now putting all the data together. This is 2011 results, I guess. And it's very interesting. This is the fully irrigated. This is the total yield, and this is for quality, just the big kernels. Anyway, the trend is the same. But what you can see here is very interesting because the fully irrigated was not as good as the R1. And actually, the fully irrigated was very close to the R4. And of course, the rainfall was just. By doing this kind of irrigation water management, we can save between 2 to 3 irrigations, at least. Okay? Let me see if you understood what I did. This was irrigated just once, just for establishment. These 3, we irrigate along with this. We kept irrigating this whenever it was needed. And this, we hold irrigation and we started irrigation until the crop showed this condition. And we kept holding and we started irrigating when the crop showed this condition. Why I choose this and this condition? Because it's when the crop needs more water. Anyway, the results are really very interesting because you could save money if you don't irrigate a couple of times at the beginning. And this is because you are stressing the crop at the vegetative stage. Again, it's not the reproductive, okay? And it seems that does not affect too much for the conditions I have there, which is a loamy soil. If I have sandy soil, I might need to conduct another study similar to this one, and I might need to irrigate at least once more here, because the water holding capacity of that soil is small. But overall, this is what we got during 3 years in a row. So we saved between 2 to 3 irrigations here. And here, between 3 to 4, but wasn't as good as this. And that one, just 1 irrigation, of course, didn't make it. So again, how we manage our irrigation is really very important. And this is for that experiment. The fully irrigated looked like this, you know. Leaves were really nice from the bottom to the top. At R4, looked like this, and the raven looked like that. Really terrible. It's closing stomata and all bottom leaves. In terms of watering the soil, the fully irrigated, the water in the soil profile was like this at the beginning, and when we harvested, was like this. So we deplete a little bit the water in the profile, but not as much as, for example, the one at R1 or the one at R4, and even the rainfed one. The rainfed was terrible. You see, we started here. Let's say here we were close to field capacity, and at the end of the season we were with practically no water in the soil. And the crop was able to look for water to as deep as 48 and probably more. But my equipment was measuring only until 48 inches there. Excuse me.
And you can see also differences in the head and those kind of things. That's because water was not enough, and water was not enough because eventually we didn't use the good ET number, for example. And in this case, it happened because of the factors, but this was clearly because of a lack of water. And this is also the kernels, how they look like from the full, which is very nice, to this one, very similar to this, but this one is too small. So there is no commercial value in that thing. So, okay, we are about to be done. The crop evapotranspiration can be measured or estimated, okay? To measure is pretty hard. We use what we call lysimeters, and pretty much are some equipments that you borrow, you put it in the soil, and you are supposed to use the soil around that equipment, and you plant here, and then you irrigate as you irrigate the rest of your field, and then those are weight. So when this changes in water because the crop evapotranspiration, those differences are weight. There are some researchers come down here and they can measure here, they can weight what's going on there. So but those equipments are extremely expensive. Now we are talking $500 million each one, those kind of things. Or we can do at field using what we call a water balance approach, where we know the soil profile characteristics, we know how much water we are applying, we know if water is going below the soil, the root zone, and those kind of things. We know how much irrigation, how much rainfall we receive, and those kind of things. And then we put all the pieces together and we calculate the amount of water that the crop uses. That's pretty much what I do there, with the experiments I show you. Or we can use equations such as this, or we can use tables as well. And because it's much more simple, I put some tables here. This is some work that was done by Dr. Bochap in 1992. He was a professor at the University of Wyoming as well. And what he did, he got information from all over Wyoming, weather variables, and he calculated the ET0, you know, the ET reference, and then he used crop coefficient for different crops. I put here alfalfa, grass, and montemedo. And he calculated the monthly evapotranspiration, reference evapotranspiration for all over Wyoming, okay? So we have here ET0, mean, maximum, and minimum. It's let's say a simple work that is very useful because, let's say, if we are expecting an average year, we could use this line here to calculate how much water we are going to use for irrigation. If we are going to expect a very hot year or very dry year, such as the last year conditions, we might use the maximum. If we expect a cool year, we might use the minimum, and so on. How we do that? Let me put all the things together here before we run out of time. Actually, if you want to know what is my ET per day, ET crop per day for alfalfa in April, I just divide this value for the number of days of the month, and I multiply then by the KC. So that means in April I should apply around 1/10 of an inch for alfalfa per day for conditions in power. If we follow this for mean conditions, for average conditions, I could have used this one and it might give me 0.2, for example, and so on. And then we want to schedule our irrigation, but the problem to schedule irrigation is that we need to know our soil. For example, this is the volume of my soil. My soil is made of pores and solids, okay? These solids are made of minerals and organic matter, and the pores are pretty much half and a half air and water, okay? So this is the whole water that is in my soil, but not all this water is available for my crop, okay? From this water, probably what is available for my crop is between this and this, somewhere here. Not even this part is all available for my crop. We also need to know the texture, which is the relative proportion of sand, silt, and clay. The importance of the texture is because the sand helps with the aeration and the drainage of my profile. The seed maintains available water, and of course the clay is for chemical purposes. The richness of the soil is in the clay. And the texture is this. The sand, if you put it bigger, it looks like this. The silt is like this, and the clay, I make it bigger just to look at, to be able to see it, but that's more or less the proportion on size. So if we look at this, the area of this looks bigger than this, which is, but if you put several balls in one, let's say, in a box, you might put in that box 4 of these balls. You might put 1,000 of these in the same box, and 1,000,000 of these in the same box. If you calculate the area of each one of these, the area of these tiny ones is going to be huge as compared to the area of this, which is the sand. Okay? So that huge area, which is the clay, is very important because the water, when we irrigate, goes around those particles and stays there. So since it's a larger area, a clay soil tends to hold more water than a sandy soil. That's the reason.
But is it available to the plant?
No, it's not.
Okay.
And we will show right now. So it looks like this. The soil is saturated, all the pores are filled. It's a soil field capacity. We have some air, which is the ideal because the crop needs air to work. And if we are at a permanent wilting point, we pretty much have more air than water between the particles. But this, for example, is the texture and the percent of water. We tend to say that clay soil holds a lot of water, which is not true. If you look at here, silt loam soil, you see here, wilting point, field capacity. Clay loam and the clay. Clay is here. Here we have more water than here. Okay? So not a clay soil is the one that has more water. Actually, it's between the silt loam and the clay loam soil where we have most of the water. And this is what we call available water for crops. If we look at another way, for example, available water in a sandy soil is a little bit. In a clay loam soil is a lot. Aeration here is high and here is medium. Drainage is the same and the compaction is the opposite. Okay? Which is the way it works actually. That's really very important for irrigation purposes. Let's see now quickly at our available water. In 3-4 more and we are done. This is the water holding capacity of any soil, okay? But here we are at field capacity and here we are at wilting point. Some people think that all this water is available to our crops, but it's not true, okay? It's just part of that. And that part is this, from here to here, from here to here, from here to here, and so on, depend on the crop, basically, and on the soil. So this is what we call readily available water, okay? Which is the one that is used by the crops. And this here, this number here, is what we call MAD, or Management Allowable Depletion. So when we calculate irrigation, we say, well, I am going to irrigate my alfalfa. Alfalfa is 50% threshold. So that means from all the water available, I am going to allow my alfalfa to use from field capacity until 50%. When I reach this point, I irrigate to fill up this part again and start over. That's the principle of irrigation, which is pretty difficult to do it because, as you said, soil varies a lot from one foot to another, you know. And we also, if we want to work with irrigation, you know, with scaling irrigation, we need to know some other characteristics of our crop, for example, at the depth of the root. So, for an irrigated grass pasture, we go to approximately 3 inches. For beans, we go to 3-4. For small grains, we go to 4-5. For alfalfa, we go to 8, even more. Feet, I'm sorry. Root depth. Doesn't mean that I am going to use all 8 feet to calculate water because I will need the Amazon River to put there if I use all 8.
Will the plants kind of adapt to the type of irrigation system you use though?
Yes.
In other words, you know, flood irrigation and alfalfa root will get really, really deep.
Yes.
On a pivot irrigation, we've noticed that they aren't required to get that deep, so they aren't as stout, those roots.
Yeah, but you know what is the thing? We should allow the crops to grow their root system, to go deep, you know. We should do that. And
We
the way
should
to do that,
encourage
yes, we should encourage the crop to go down.
Right.
And the way to do that is to apply, you know, the necessary amount of water. Yeah, sometimes we think, oh, it's gonna get stressed, and it's really not. So we should leave it like that. So the crop doesn't want to die. It's gonna start growing its roots, and as the roots grow, you have more volume of soil that the plant is gonna be able to explore, and will be able to get that water.
That's a tough call sometimes. You don't know whether to stress it enough to make that plant really work for that water, or to get in there and water it.
It is, but it's possible. That's what people is doing in other regions, such as in Kansas, in parts of Nebraska where there is no water at all. I was last year visiting with some people in New Mexico, and a farmer had 1,000 acres of drip irrigation, subsurface drip,
Hmm.
1,000 acres. And he told me, I received water from the irrigation district just once this season. And I asked him, how do you do it? He said, well, I have a couple of wheels that are drying out, and I let my crop to get a little bit stressed, and I put water when it's needed, and I am being able to make it. And the guy sells to Costco, you know. So I calculated here how much water we put with flooded, you know. We put 3 to 4 times more than the crop needs. That's what we do. Well, but it's cheaper, that's what we have. I understand. I will do the same probably if I am a farmer, you know. But anyway, we need to know also the depth of the root system if we want to calculate the right amount of water for our crop. And let's say, for example, we want to irrigate alfalfa, and the ET0, which is the reference, is 9.7 for July based on those tables I show. The KC is 108, it's a silty loam soil, and the depth of the root system is 3 feet. In the management allowable depletion is 50%. How we do that? Okay, so the first step is we calculate the really available water, which is the available water times the root depth times the MAD. And there are some tables such as this that relate the texture of the soil with the available water in inches per foot, okay? Those are very general. Doesn't mean it's like that, but it gives us a good shot of what could be. And it's much better than nothing, actually. That's the real. And so let's say we said that our soil was, I don't remember, was what? Silty loam. Silty loam would be 1.8. So 1.8 times the root depth times 50, which is the management allowable depletion. So we have the really available water, it becomes 2.7 inches. So we have the ET0 is 9.7 for July divided by the number of days, gives us this for per day. And then we have the KC is 108, the ETC is this times this. So per day we have to apply 0.34 inches. And if we know this, and we know this, which we have it, we calculate, we divide this by this, and we have 8 days, which is our irrigation frequency for this specific case. Very simple, but this is the way it works. So by doing like this, we guarantee that the available water in the soil profile is going to be depleted in 50%, and the crop is not going to be stressed. When it's depleted at 50%, we put this amount of water, we calculate it here again. Well, how much is going to be during the season, such a thing? Let's put it all together here, and I am done, I guess. On average, the evapotranspiration of alfalfa here is about 35 inches per acre per year. If we make the numbers, this is approximately 1 million gallons of water, 950,000 gallons of water per acre, okay? Well, we have to use the application efficiency of the system, okay?
So if we use the application efficiency of the system, which is approximately between 40 to 60% for surface, between 75 to go to 85% for sprinkler, and 90 plus for drip, this is what we have to have. We must have 1.6 million gallons of water if we are gonna irrigate the surface system, or 1.3 for sprinklers, or 1 million for drip. This is for 1 acre per year.
We better never show that slide to the people in Los Angeles,
They're gonna kill us.
because they'll think we're just raping the land by using that much water.
Yeah, but there is no way to avoid using that water,
Yeah.
because what we have. And this is pretty, it looks a lot, but if we don't do that, we don't produce actually, because it's what we have. Okay? Anyway, I wanted to show that the ET crop is at critical growth stages can be used, for irrigation, scheduling to avoid stress in crops, and also that the ET crop is a weather dependent, but also water and plant dependent, and we should periodically check at our fields. We can go with some devices and to take some soil samples and check how wet our soil is. That we can have a good idea what's going on if we have experience about that. That's what usually people does. So by doing that, we guarantee that our crop is not going to be under stress. If we avoid the crop being under stress, we are going to be in a good situation. I understand that there is several ways we can use to have a better use of our water resources for irrigation purposes, but I also understand that with the conditions we have here and what we have in terms of infrastructure, what we are doing is pretty much what can be done, unless we change. And thank you, that's what I have for you, and I would appreciate if you fill out this form. It's required for me to have this form. And if you have questions, please.
Yes,
Yes, please.
on that last equation page where you said the 8 days, so you'd have to water it every 8 days?
No,
Or
that,
take 8 days
that
to
was
get
the
down
case
to the,
for that example. In that
Yeah,
ex-
in that, in that particular situation, you'd have to water it every 8 days?
Yes,
Okay.
every 8 days in that example, yes. But again, that depends on your crop.
Yeah,
When you planted the soil in the ET. So you have to have all those things together, and then you calculate your irrigation frequency. So that means we need to have an irrigation scheduling for every single year and for every single crop. That's what we should do. Are you in charge of this here?
yeah.
Yeah. Do you need me to leave a copy of this presentation, or how is it gonna work?